All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Cheryl Nen. Thank you so much for coming. I am the river keeper with Milwaukee River Keeper. And so we really appreciate everyone coming. Our organization, I think everyone on this call hopefully knows who we are. I know we have a lot of our SWAN members in attendance, but essentially we protect, restore, connect, and advocate for our waterways. And we acknowledge that those are located on the occupied traditional homelands of the Potawatomi, the Ho-Chunk, and Menominee nations. And we're the people of Wisconsin sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. We hope that you got to watch this great film, The Condor and the Eagle, which is about pipelines all over North and South America. But we really want to focus our attention this evening on the pipelines right here at home. So tonight we have some amazing panelists. We have an esteemed tribal leader, several activists, local experts who have been working on challenges, mostly surrounding pipelines that are affecting our waters in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and also Michigan. And so just letting folks know we're recording this panel and we will send it out afterward for folks that maybe couldn't be with us tonight live. If folks could stay muted until we kind of join the question and answer session later, we'd really appreciate that. You can add questions to the chat anytime and we'll hopefully be able to go through those. And we're hoping to give each of our panelists about 10 minutes of time to tell us what they're working on and how we can help, and then hopefully open up a conversation. But first, I really want to introduce Terry from Urban Ecology Center. This is an event that we're co-hosting as part of the Environmental and Social Justice Film Festival in partnership with Urban Ecology Center, Washington Park. So off to you, Terry.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Just want to welcome everybody to tonight's discussion. Hopefully this film series helps to enlighten people, but also to share thoughts and ideas that people have. So I just welcome you all tonight. We have our next film series, April 20th, which is called Two American Families. And it deals with poverty and issues of poverty in Milwaukee. So welcome tonight. And I look forward to the conversation.
Awesome, thanks, Terry. If you haven't been to the UAC in Washington Park, you should get yourself down there because it's an amazing, and you get to meet wonderful people like Terry Evans. So I am going to introduce now a friend, Eric Hansen, who I think many of you on the call will know or be familiar with. Eric became familiar with a lot of our beautiful spaces in Wisconsin while researching hiking guidebooks for Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula. And during that time, he really learned about a lot of powerful water protector campaigns, such as the Crandon Mine issue, the Bad River train blockade. And Eric's been involved in a lot of different fights against crude oil pipelines and oil trains, as well as against a lot of ill-advised mine proposals that are continuing to threaten our water. So we worked together locally in Milwaukee to stop crude oil exports from the Port of Milwaukee, which we're really proud about, and to push for a lot of safety improvements associated with these bomb trains that were carrying, heavy Bakken crude over our rivers like 36 different times and into our port. And so Eric is a really active member of Sierra Club and CARS, and I'm going to pass it over to him to do the intros and get things going. Eric?
Thank you, Cheryl. How's the audio? Good, okay. I think all of us have seen this film. It's quite a powerful film, The Eagle and the Condor. And we're ready to connect it to here. And a lot of our connection over the past 10 years that I can think of is centered around Bad River and the threats that have happened there. And I think I can say that all of us owe a debt of gratitude to Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, for their principled and steadfast defense of the water, all the way back to the Bad River train blockade. And if you're not familiar with that episode, look it up. You may be grinning for days as you learn that story. Also during the Pinocchio mine proposal, which was roughly 8, 9, 10 years ago. And now we come to Line 5 and the reroute. And we're fortunate today to have Chairman Mike Wiggins of the Bad River Band with us. I'm going to go introduce all the panelists first, and then we'll circle back to our first speaker, who will be Chairman Wiggins. And Chairman Wiggins is somebody who's earned widespread respect and affection in the middle of these campaigns. I was fortunate to spend some time with him during the mine campaign, and all I can say is my life is better for that time spent. He is the elected chairman of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. Also with us tonight is Philomena Quebec, and Philomena is a member of the Bad River Band and an attorney. I heard her last night on another Zoom, and I hope to hear her again in a few minutes. She was extremely powerful in defining exactly what's wrong with this proposal on Line 5 and what the threats are and what the impacts would be on local people. And if memory serves me well, Philomena is also a county supervisor up there. Also with us tonight is Susan Batila, who is a political artist and a public health nurse, also known as a street medic at demonstrations. You're seeing some of her art later in a slideshow, and she's famous for her puppets, particularly the fish and the sturgeon, banners, and various artwork. Also with us tonight is Grace Quinn, and Grace is a youth climate organizer who mostly works with Sunrise and is now working on the statewide project March 4th to Earth Day. And I think she will be telling us more about that project as we get going around with the talks. And in addition, from, I believe, across the lake on the other eastern shores of Lake Michigan, we have Sean McBrearty, who is with us from Oil and Water Don't Mix. He's the coordinator of that organization. And we're very pleased that he's able to join us and in this conversation this evening. So with those introductions in hand, I'd like to ask Chairman Mike Wiggins to enlighten us, to tell us what is going on with Line 5 and what he knows that we need to know. Chairman Wiggins.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's an honor to be with you all tonight. Our effort to essentially protect our watershed and all of our water resources continues. In Bad River, we've had incredible leadership and humbling warriors over the years that have really paved the way and helped folks like myself understand what's at stake and what our responsibilities are as it pertains to our home. I want to acknowledge my elder, Joe Rose Sr., who walked on this past year. We just observed his 1-year memorial feast and ceremony. And, Joe Rose Sr. Just was a compass point for us, and he carried story narratives on how we viewed our home, how we interacted with our home. He carried old stories that helped us understand and unlock the life-giving kind of capacities and functionalities that our watershed, from the Pinocchios up by the mineral body, 26 miles downstream and downhill across the foothills and the reservation, northward onto the big lake, Lake Superior, as Joe used to say, Anishinaabe Gitchagumi, that the big lake. The functionality and the role that our watershed plays in our own lives as people, but also for all of our relatives, like the wolves, the deer, the fish, the birds. Out in the big lake is Madeline Island and the Apostle Islands, our ancestral home We have a word for that called Moningwanakanig. That's our word for Madeline Island out there. But that's an old migratory flyway epicenter. It's we know from a fishery standpoint because we catch fish in the Bad River in the spring that have tags from hatcheries up the North Shore. We also catch fish in the Bad River in the heart of our reservation that have tags from east of the Keweenaw Peninsula over towards Sault Ste. Marie. So we know that our home in Bad River and Madeline Island has always been a bit of a epicenter for travel and the comings and goings of all kinds of life, including our people over the span of time. And so as we resist Line 5, we've been battling in adversarial litigation inside the sovereign boundaries of our reservation. And that's been a huge challenge. Enbridge, as a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, international conglomerate, is dropping every legal tactic they can drop on us. And it's usually 4:35 p.m. on a Friday night, so our staff and attorneys are always overloaded. Our Natural Resource Department staff have been essentially overwhelmed trying to respond to the litany of litigative kind of actions from Enbridge. I say all of that because up here in the Northland right now, all of the radio ads go a little something like, Enbridge is honoring the Bad River tribe by rerouting out of their reservation boundaries. And so they're honoring, if we unpack that, is essentially a litigation battle that has cost us over $4 million already. That is $4 million, in context with the fact that as a nation, we just came through and as well as all of you, we just came through a pandemic when we're seriously trying to fight for the survival and protection of our peoples in the face of uncertainty from COVID-19. When I think back over the last couple of years, in the meantime, Enbridge is just on an all-out legal assault against us to remain right in our reservation boundaries, to remain right in the right-of-way that they are illegally trespassing in. And that represents essentially the old Line 5 pathway. There's two main points in that current Line 5 path inside our reservation that present themselves as spots of imminent failure. One is right in the Bad River at a place we call the Meander. But because of an oxbow lake forming, the river itself is pounding on the right of way and is only about 20 feet from the pipe. And so it could be this flood season here this spring melt. It could be the next 2-ton iceberg that comes ripping down the river in a high water scenario that punches into the pipe. We don't know, but we do know that Enbridge is unprepared. They're unwilling to look at safety protocol. They have never shared any of that with us. The other place is in some ravine tributaries of a place called Denemy Creek. And there, because of Enbridge's faulty planning and engineering, they contributed to the changing of water runoff that over time caused the sloughing of a ravine embankment. That sloughing off of land and earth as it fell away essentially left the Enbridge Line 5 pipe hanging in midair, completely exposed to plain view, eyesight, observation. It was hanging about 50 feet over an expanse, and that there was a catastrophic failure that could have seen essentially, apocalyptic style release of oil toxicity. So the two spots that are at issue are really critical as we try to protect our on-reservation boundaries. The social justice component is pretty alarming to me. While they're fighting us in court on res, their claim is essentially as though they have nationhood status. Their claim is in essence eminent domain powers, which translated in layman's terms is that they control our lands, they control our waters, they control the under earth, essentially. When you think about horizontal directional drilling, their plans to drill underneath rivers and things like that. They control the lands and the waterways, and all of that control is rooted in the fact that their pipeline transport system must operate. And so you can imagine the frustration as a sovereign nation on our end when we're translating all of that into the realities of our ecosystems by way of fisheries that we get food from, by way of the drinking aquifers that they want to horizontally drill through, and by way of sitting under the constant and clear and present threat of imminent rupture and failure of their pipe. That's a low grade stress that sometimes bubbles up to high grade, but at the end of the day is always a bit of a dark shadow over my mind as a tribal leader who cares about this place. When we look at their effort to reroute, there's a bit of a tried and true tactic from a fossil fuel company, or I'll say resource extraction company. Most of the right-of-way route that they want to reroute in has either been bought or landowners who refuse to sell out have been threatened. The municipality, Mellon, Wisconsin, where they're going to cross the Bad River, was given a small portion of money with the promise of greater riches once the pipe opens for operation. So there's a bit of that bait and switch that gets folks riled up and gives them a vested interest in all of a sudden becoming an Enbridge supporter. But our defense there in the reroute effort up in the watershed is going to be through the treaty reserve water rights that we carry and the hydrological connectivity. And we have Earth Justice helping us with, the forthcoming litigation. Where people can help us is in the state process and also the federal process when it comes to the environmental impact statements. Reading those drafts that are put forward, attending the comment sessions, dialing into Glyphwick, our messaging, myself, or I know even Philomena, we can put folks in touch with some of the facts of the environmental impact statement conditions that are probably questionable. I know when the state put theirs out, the overwhelming 90% plus folks that attended the comment period were in opposition. The overwhelming message was throw this in the burn barrel and start over. It was completely similar to Wisconsin mining law. It was scientifically dishonest and socially unjust. So, it's we're being victimized. We're being harmed by Enbridge in real time. We have an imminent threat of pipeline rupture above us and inside our waterways. And then we get to listen to Enbridge proclaim that they're honoring Bad River every day on radio ads. So it's a really frustrating thing. And all of it, I'll say all of it is not about money. It's about our cultural lifeways. It's about I've said this in the past. It's about the fact that we're an ancient people in our ancestral homeland. And just like that dinosaur, that prehistoric fish, Lake Superior sturgeon, our Ojibwe word is Name. Just like that prehistoric fish, our system has been around a long, long time before man, before money, before capitalism, and we're going to need our systems long after climate change adaptation and all of those changes that are coming have their effect. We need our aquifers. We plan on being around another 1,000 years. And so that long view really diminishes the notion of money and temporary buyouts or payouts or anything like that, and sends us back into the reality of how important the ecosystems and waterways are around us for our good life, for the health and welfare of our nation that we're trying to send into the future, and ultimately the health and welfare of all of our people, and including all of those babies that are still on the way. So I'll say that much. Thank you for giving me a few minutes. I want to be mindful of time. So miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Wiggins. Philomena Quebec, if we could ask you to speak next.
I don't know if I was an official speaker, but sure, I'd be happy to say something. This is, I'm in my noisy kitchen. I got my noisy dogs and my noisy kid.
We're glad to see you.
It's really good to see you guys. I wanted to, I heard our one of our first speakers here, Mr. Terry Evans, and his discussion about urban ecology, and certainly, some of the concerns that we have in our community. We care about our community so much. Yeah, put your hands on the butter. And our wealth ultimately comes from the fact that we have a place to live, with water. That's at the core of our, that's at the core of our condition as people, of our economies, of our health. And this proposal, and the engineering schemes that the company has developed would be to blow up all the water systems all around our reservation that feed into the water that comes to our reservation. Our river, the Bad River community is, our land base is completely surrounded, and through every piece of our land, there is water flowing and there's rivers, because we're at the bottom of this. We're at the very end point of our watershed. All of the water flows north in our community, and it ultimately flows through the Bad River and through the Kakagan River. And so every water system and every ancient bedrock aquifer that this company plans to blow up or drill through has the potential for a very serious impact on our future ability to exist as a people within our land. We cannot exist as a people without our land base. And so, we really do ask you to take some time to send in some comments on the comment period that's happening right now with the federal cycle, and then with the state. Even if you take 5 or 10 minutes of your time, the fact is, your comment will have to be reviewed by someone in power with authority over this particular decision. And delay is very powerful in this sort of action. So I don't really want to speak too much more. I'm sorry, it's very noisy in this kitchen. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you for participating in this discussion today. Miigwech.
Thank you, Philomena Quebec. And Philomena was talking about comments, and today came news that the Wisconsin DNR is extending the comment period for another month until April 15th. Lo and behold, there are 10,000 comments in, and this is a sign that we're getting some traction on all this. And let me keep this moving. Why don't we go to Sue Batila? And Sue, take it away.
I am unmuted. Yes. And can you see the whole screen? Can you see the whole screen?
Yeah, Sue, we can.
Okay. I'm just going to be showing some pictures to give you a flavor for the places where resistance to the pipelines and protection of the water of the Great Lakes and the rivers has been going on for the past years in Wisconsin, and some from our friends in Minnesota and Michigan. This is the picture behind me is the Milwaukee Water Commons has an event every year called We Are Water. And we have participation from the Light Brigade and also LED lights on the fish. I'm going to keep on going here. And this has been mentioned when this is cars having an event on the water at the confluence of our rivers, downtown Milwaukee, where they all join before they flow into Lake Michigan. This is a kayaktivist event. It is called that. And water is central to it all. This is a river that was sewn together by one of the members of 350 Madison, who's a kite maker. And the river is used for different marches, and animals and fish who live in our waters peak above the water of this cloth river. This is the last Indian summer, which was several years ago. And this is the children's stage. And Melanie Arians made the Great Lakes. And there are some of the fish puppets that I made together with the Art Build folks in Milwaukee and with other friends. This is an art build, and that's an event where people gather together to make puppets and signs and other paraphernalia to make the message really stand out when we're in the streets and protecting the water. And the way this is done is that the image is projected from a computer with an LED projector. People trace it and then they paint it. Going back to the history, the Crandon mine on the Wolf was going to pollute the Wolf River. And this photo is in the 1990s. This was a hearing and rally at the state fairgrounds. This is a march in Madison, and we have drummers who I think are probably Menominee leading the march to the Capitol against the Crandon mine. People fought the mine for 28 years and won. This is a mural that I painted that was exhibited on the front of the Woodland Pattern Gallery many years ago, 15 years ago or so, maybe 20 years ago. And it celebrates the victory against the mine. This is actually at the Mole Lake Sakagan Chippewa Reservation, and it's a photo of the people, many of the people who spent years of their life fighting against the Crandon mine, which was a sulfide mine, zinc and copper, that would have put acid drainage into the Wolf River and the wild rice. And people came together, an alliance of native and non-native people, fishermen, hikers, a wide variety of folks, young and old. And it was a very powerful coalition because of the diversity and of all of the people repeatedly coming out. So 1976 through 2003. And this is tombstones that the Wolf Watershed Education Committee made. And we painted these and had them as an installation to teach people about the dangers of sulfide mining. These cardboard signs lasted about 10 years. It was pretty nice when they traveled. People have heard about the incredible Standing Rock occupation of several years ago against the Dakota Access Pipeline. This is a beautiful drawing by Josh Yoder about the kind of resistance, the peaceful and prayerful resistance was met by violence by many, many police agencies. And unfortunately, the pipeline was built. Here we are at UW Milwaukee, and children are painting "No Dakota Access Pipeline" snake on the sidewalk. Then we'll go to the No Pinoki mine, which is a huge open pit iron mine that was multinational mining corporations tried to put in the Pinoki Hills, which are south of Ashland, and again cross the waterways of the Bad River tribe. People fought the mine, and there are some of the Milwaukee people with t-shirts, the No Pinoki Mine t-shirts. Friends of mine camped at the site of the mine, and that mine was defeated because it was overwhelmingly opposed by the population in the area, and they had lots of allies. This is one of the best puppets I've ever seen. This is the giant jingle dress dancer, and she was built on Madeline Island. And Catherine Morisseau, who's Bad River Ojibwe, was the lead person in building this incredible puppet, together with Chris Lutter Gardella, who's a puppet maker who used to live near Ashland on Lake Superior. He's now in the Twin Cities. Here we are in Duluth, and this was several years ago, maybe 4 years ago. It was before COVID. And there was a march against Line 3, which is the pipeline that goes through Minnesota and ends in Superior, Wisconsin, where Line 5 begins. So this is a drawing that I did for a comic strip, more like graphic nonfiction. And the pipeline goes from Alberta through Canada, enters the US in northwest Minnesota, goes through Minnesota to Superior, through northern Wisconsin, and it ends up going through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And here we are. Here's a map of Line 5 heading east. So the pipeline, this is the proposed pipeline. The pipeline that exists now goes through Bad River, and the new proposed pipeline by Enbridge crosses the same waterways, is the same risk to the Bad River Reservation's water, to the Kakagan sloughs and the wild rice. So this is the proposed pipeline that solves none of the problems. This beautiful artwork is by Jackie Fawn, of a woman who's ricing. So the artists from all over the country, and even from Asia, Europe, other places, contributed artwork against the pipelines. And the network, it continues to grow, and the artists have gotten to know each other. We share images, we share silkscreen posters and printed posters, and there's an incredible network of artists involved with protecting the water. This is William Krupinski, who's here in Wisconsin, who's an incredible cartoonist. Some of you know him. And so line 5 goes to the Mackinac Straits. There is now a 70, it's no longer a 67-year-old pipeline, it's a 70-year-old pipeline that's corroding, that's off the bottom of the Mackinac Straits that connect Lake Michigan with Lake Huron. And there's a proposal to build a tunnel underneath the straits to carry even more oil from the Alberta tar sands in Canada through our territories, through our lands, through our water, only to go back into Canada and be exported for foreign consumption. So we get nothing out of this except all the risk. This is a beautiful photo that I just recently grabbed from a wonderful photographer. This is the Mackinac Straits, how it looked this winter. So every year, Labor Day weekend, people gather at the Straits to come together against the Mackinac, the pipeline underneath the Mackinac Straits. This is the Light Brigade from Detroit and my traveling fish family. And so we're making more banners and more signs. These were painted up in Ashland at Northland College together with Catherine Morisseau and other friends, Ojibwe and non-native folks. And I just had to put this in. It's not in the right place. This is in the Pinokies. They had armed security people guarding the pilot holes in the woods. They were operating illegally in Wisconsin, and this is the kind of, this is what Enbridge and the mining companies will do. They'll go as far as they can to frighten us and try to say that they're the ones who have the power, but we're the ones who have the power. This is the river that Madison folks built with some of the animals and the fish on top of it. Here we have some photos in Duluth of Duluth Indigenous folks leading the march against Line 3. And it was a beautiful march. Here is the tribal canoe at the Mackinac Straits. And I believe this is from one of the Ojibwe tribes in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And they're gonna have an even bigger event this year for a whole week, Labor Day week.
Hey, Sue, I think we need to wind it up a little bit in order to give Grace and Sean. Yeah.
And that was the last one.
Oh my gosh, you and I have ESP then.
We usually
Great
do.
timing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, Sue Patila. What a coincidence. Our next speaker is Grace Quinn, and Grace is here as a representative of Sunrise, and she's located in Appleton, Wisconsin. Grace, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Grace, let me stop you for 1 second. Hey, Cheryl, how are we doing on time?
I think we're good. We have time for, we certainly want to give Grace time to talk about her great work. And then we have
Sean
that we want to hear from. And then we want to have some time for Q&A. So if
but do we have to be off at the end of the hour or enlighten me?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
I'll
I needed to ask that. Grace, sorry for the interruption. Please take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries at all. I am going to share my screen eventually, so I don't know if that's an issue. I know Susan's sharing her screen right now, but we can figure that out. But yes, hello. My name's Grace Quinn, and as Eric said, I'm located on Menominee land, also known as Appleton, Wisconsin. And I'm a youth climate organizer. I organize with Sunrise Fox Valley, And I also am affiliated with a other hodgepodge of organizations. But most of my work has revolved around the resistance against the tar sand oil pipeline, Line 3. So I know a few other speakers previously mentioned Line 3, but Line 3 goes from Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin, but mostly goes through Minnesota. And the reason why this pipeline is really bad is because tar sand oils are really, really thick. So it almost has like that consistency of peanut butter. So when it goes through this pipeline, it takes a significant amount of energy, a significant amount of water, and it also raises a risk for corroding because that's like thick and chunky and it's scraping against the pipeline. So Line 3 already existed before the new Line 3. So Enbridge calls it a replacement project. Line 3 is not a replacement project. This is a whole new pipeline. There's the pre-existing Line 3 as kind of what I previously mentioned, corroding, old, broken. So they decided to put a new pipeline in. Now, this is an issue not only because we don't want a new pipeline, but because leaving that old pipeline in creates significant risk for future generations for ecological damage that will be irreversible. But yeah, so this new pipeline, we don't want it in. It contributes more to climate change than the entire Minnesota economy alone. It's the equivalent to 50 plus oil rigs. It encroaches upon native sovereignty. So this goes through Ojibwe land. It goes through the Anishinaabe Nation, and it puts wild rice beds at significant risk. The extraction industry perpetuates missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is often sometimes uncomfortable to talk about, but it's very, very real. That when you are building a pipeline, you get these man camps, a bunch of workers that are coming in from all across the country, that are staying in hotels, that are staying in like traveling cars, and they're alone and they're lonely, and that contributes to the sex trafficking industry, especially of Native women. And Native women have a higher rate of going missing than any other demographic in the United States. So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about my time on this past summer. I was on the front lines of the Line 3 fight. Hold on, I'm just going to share my screen. I apologize for the delay. All right, there we go. See all my fancy tabs up. So I originally went to Minnesota for the Treaty People Gathering. So the Treaty People Gathering meant from June 5th to June 8th. And our big day of action was on June 7th. So on the Treaty People Gathering, thousands of people came from all across the country to join in on this. I met people from California, from Washington, from Maine, Rhode Island. There were people there that weren't even from the United States. And then on June 8th, over 300 people were arrested while taking part in direct action at 2 different Enbridge work sites. So right here, you can see these are protesters that came through. This is the exact location of where they have built Line 3. I couldn't think of a worse place to build a pipeline. This was also part of the Treaty People Gathering, some really wonderful art. This is chalk art. They shut down a highway. That's Winona LaDuke and Tara Hauska, who are 2 very well-known Indigenous women who have been on the front lines of Line 3. This is also at the Treaty People Gathering. This is myself. I'm the woman in the white hat. So this is also the day that we overtook a work site, and we told Enbridge that we weren't going to let them work that day, that we were going to delay construction because we didn't want to see that pipeline put in the ground. So during that day, we arrived at this work site at 7 in the morning, and we were there till nearly 2 in the morning, standing off with a SWAT team. It was in 90-degree heat. There were no bathrooms. There was very limited water. It was an extremely intense experience. And I later told my little cousin about this, who lives in Minnesota. She's 8 years old and considers herself a water protector herself. And she had asked me, like, was it scary standing off against all these police officers and these SWAT team members? And, you know, the obvious answer is like very badass. No, absolutely not. I wasn't afraid. But I have to say that answer is also very real. That when you're locked arms with all these other people that feel as passionately about this issue as you do, you look at those police officers and you realize that they're there because that is their job, because they're getting paid to be there. And you're there because you have so much love for the environment and so much love for the people, and the people you're with and people you don't even know. And I don't know, I just remember feeling very lucky that I've been blessed with the realization of how interconnected we all are and the love for the water and the power that water has. And that may be something that the SWAT team members and the police officers may never reach. But I think to get them to the point where they reach that point is all we can do is continue to be there in love and in a peaceful and good way. Yeah, so after the Treaty People gathering, I moved on to Camp Firelight. So this boardwalk was built by Enbridge to march in their big drilling machine. And we told Enbridge, absolutely not. You are not going to put that drilling machine through these beautiful wetlands. So we camped out here for over a week until we were removed by the local police force. Just a few really beautiful pictures. Again, like I couldn't think of a worse place to build a pipeline. And during our time here, we were there in ceremony. We had ceremony every single night. It was very community based. It was very, very powerful to be living right on the headwaters of the Mississippi River. Again, like the power of water is just, it's absolutely incredible. And to be able to see the life that it provides, of hearing the crickets at night and the millions of fireflies and all the frogs. And another thing that's kind of loops back to what I had previously talked about MMIW was something I experienced here. So missing murdered Indigenous women is an issue that I was fairly familiar with before coming to the front lines. And a term that's often used is generational trauma. We hear it around Black Lives Matter. We've heard it around missing and murdered Indigenous women. But it was here where I really felt the weight of that word, because there wasn't a single person who was of Indigenous descent that I met that didn't have a sister or a brother or an aunt or a cousin or a friend or a brother or a wife that had been missing. Yeah, it was truly impactful to hear the stories and how impacted Native people have been by this pandemic. And at this camp, I was also approached by Indigenous leadership and was told that at our very camp, there was a sex trafficker that was there and that was arrested by the police. And yeah, it's important that when we're uplifting the voices of people who are on the front lines of pipelines, that we keep this in the conversation. I just recently spoke to a legislator in my area as we're introducing a anti-Line 3 and Line 5 resolution. And we have a portion of it that is on MMIW. And I was told that it was not necessary in the resolution. And that was why they were voting against it, because they said that it was too much and that they thought it strayed from the focus. But that is a very important issue that we need to be talking about in all of pipeline work. Yeah, so on a happier note, beautiful photo of the Mississippi River. But unfortunately, I came home from the front lines and I was faced with this photo. This is an example of the ecological destruction that Enbridge has done to the Mississippi River. This is a result of a breached aquifer and spilled drilling fluid. You can also see this here. It's a drastically different ecosystem than when I was there. And although it's very sad to view these photos, very heartbreaking, it also reminds us of the impermanence of life, and that it's important that we're appreciating the ecosystems that we have now, and that there is so much that we can save, and that we're doing all that we can to protect it. So yeah, so that's a little bit of my story on the front lines. And now that I've been back home on Menominee land, Appleton, Wisconsin, I've been involved in a few different organizing projects, but the main one that I've been working on is the March 4th to Earth Day project. So this originally stemmed from just an idea of stopping Line 5. How are we going to get the word out to let people know that we don't want this pipeline, and let our legislators know that there's a strong resistance against this in Wisconsin? And this developed into the March 4th to Earth Day project. So March 4th to Earth Day is 8 consecutive weeks of climate justice rallies in over 20 cities across the state of Wisconsin. This started March 4th, hence the name March 4th. And so I believe we are now on to our 3rd week. And these are held every Friday, either at noon or 5 p.m. Some of them are big and crazy and have speakers and songs and chants. Others, like myself in Appleton, are just simply climate strikes, where we stand on the side of the road every Friday at 5 p.m. with signs against Line 5, against overall construction industry, and calling for local climate action. So I invite all of you, I will send the Facebook page in the chat, but I invite all of you to check that out and see if you can find an event that's close to your community, and I would encourage you all to attend one of those. As previously stated by a few of our speakers, the DNR has extended the comment period for Line 5, so I would really encourage everyone to submit a comment to that. I think someone else said this, I'm going to say it again. Your comment can be as lengthy as you want or as short as you want. If you just want to put stop Line 5, honor the treaties, we would love that. If you want to write a whole 5-paragraph essay about how pissed you are about this pipeline, go ahead, use it as your journal and vent. It's really to your discretion. I would also encourage everyone to call their legislators and let them know that you would like to see climate action at the forefront of their platforms and your opposition to Line 5. Unfortunately, climate change is a very large and systemic issue, and as is pipelines. And although we'd like to think that our individual actions have an impact, they have an impact on changing the hearts and the minds of the people often. But political change is also a driving force, as much as sometimes we hate it. So sometimes you have to play them at their own game. So again, I would really encourage you to call up your legislators. But yeah, and then also I would invite you to take action. Direct action sounds really scary, like getting arrested, hanging out with police officers, living in a pipeline work site. But I would definitely say it's worth it for all that's at stake. There's a statistic called the 3.5% rule. There's an organization called Extinction Rebellion that often refers to that. And it's this idea that if we have more than 3.5% of the population that are participating in direct action, there will be monumental change, because that is enough of the population that is in direct resistance to the government. And right now we are close to that tipping point. We are very close to that 3.5%. So I invite all of you to take time to think about the place where what is your position in society? What do you have to lose, and what privilege do you carry? I realize that I'm a young white woman that is very blessed to come from a family that has a lot, that for me to go out and put my body on the front lines for treaty rights in opposition to pipelines, that's something that I need to do, because I need to use my privilege for that. But yeah, so I just offer a lot of self-reflection. But yeah, that's all I have for everyone. But I appreciate you so much for letting me be on this panel. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Grace. Eric's muted. Eric, you're on mute, friend.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Grace Quinn. We're now going to turn to Sean McBrearty from Oil and Water Dunk Mix. And after that, I hope we'll have some room for some questions and some discussion. Sean, take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Eric. And thanks for having me tonight. It's great to be here with you all, especially I have I've followed the Wisconsin Line 5 fight for years, and I really appreciate the leadership of Chairman Wiggins and Bad River Band in that fight. Without you guys, we wouldn't be where we are on how close we are to stopping Line 5, both in Wisconsin and, of course, here in Michigan. As Eric said, I'm Sean McBrady. I'm the coordinator of Oil and Water Don't Mix, which is a statewide campaign which was born out of the Kalamazoo oil spill. And we've been working together for the last decade fighting Line 5. So I'm going to share my screen, and I just have a few slides I want to get through briefly here. Little about what we're working on. So, as I said, our movement here against Line 5 was born out of the Kalamazoo oil spill, where in 2010, Enbridge Line 6B spilled 1.1 million gallons of tar sands into Talmadge Creek and the Kalamazoo River. It took them 17 hours to shut down the pipeline. And when those 17 hours were passing, Enbridge's command center actually misread the oil spill, and they misread the oil spill as blockage, so they increased pressure in the pipeline, which is why it wound up being as large a spill as it was. The week before, Enbridge had testified in US Congress that the pipeline was safe. So at that point, environmental organizations and activists across Michigan started looking into Enbridge's other pipelines. And these are the things that we found. So at the beginning of our campaign, we had an all-Republican administration in Michigan with Governor Rick Snyder, who's now being tried for his role in the Flint water crisis, and Attorney General Bill Schuette, who was his lackey in every sense of the word. It was obvious by 2014 that neither of them was going to do anything for us to stop this. So we set a new campaign goal of using the intervening 4 years before we would elect a new governor of Michigan in making sure that we built enough public resistance to Line 5 that whichever candidates were running for governor and attorney general would have to take a position on Line 5 in the 2018 election. And we were wildly successful. When the 2018 election came around, our polls were showing that we had 84% approval statewide for shutting down Line 5. And we elected Attorney General Dana Nessel, who actually decided to run for Attorney General at one of the Oil and Water Don't Mix presentations on Line 5. She raised her hand and asked if the Attorney General could file a lawsuit that shuts down the pipeline. I said yes. She turned and looked at her wife and said, "I think I'm running for Attorney General." And her wife starts laughing, but a year later, Dana was in the race and she won. She's been with us since day one. Governor Whitmer also ran on shutting down Line 5, and after a little over a year in office, she really started getting into it. After almost 2 years in office, she finally had what she thought was enough information and a solid enough case to pull the switch and revoke the easement that Enbridge was granted to operate Line 5 back in 1953. So Enbridge is currently operating in Michigan without a valid easement to operate the pipeline. They also don't have the insurance that's required to clean up an oil spill. So far, Line 5 has spilled at least 33 times, with the first recorded spill in 1968. We've been very lucky that so far that there hasn't been a major spill in the Straits of Mackinac, which to us in Michigan is the most concerning part of this pipeline. It crosses the Straits, which is a 5-mile wide body of water separating Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. The water moves through the Straits of Mackinac back and forth 180 degrees every 1 to 3 days, because Lake Michigan and Huron are one body of water technically, so the water slashes back and forth. At the peak flow, the flow of the oil through the Straits of, or the flow of water through the Straits of Mackinac is over 10 times the flow of water over Niagara Falls. So it's a lot of water moving very quickly, and Line 5 runs 23 million gallons a day. So this worst case scenario picture of a Line 5 spill in the Straits is based off a 1 million gallon spill. If Enbridge kept a pipeline running for 17 hours like they did in Kalamazoo, we'd be looking at something 17 times worse than this. Well, actually, it would be absolutely horrendous for the watershed of both Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. We'd probably even see water getting up into the Sioux Locks where they meet Lake Superior. So what would an oil spill look like here? And I want to go through, this is a University of Michigan Water Center simulation that they put together, I think back in 2013, of what a 12-hour release would look like in the Straits. And what you'll see here is three different kinds of dots rather. The red dots are supposed to represent oil near the, I think red's near the surface, yellow is mid-depth, and blue is near the bottom. The reason why that's important is because since this line carries light crude, it would spread throughout the entire water column and be incredibly difficult to clean up. Now, this city on the north end of the Straits, St. Ignace, pulls their water directly from the lake. This island over here is Mackinac Island, a major tourist destination that's really only reachable by ferry or small private planes and helicopters. In the summer, the population of Mackinac Island surges. They also draw their water straight from the lake. So if in the case of a spill, Mackinac Island would lose their water source within hours. The horses that are on the island, because they don't have cars allowed on Mackinac Island, the horses would likely be stranded because they would not be able to operate rescue boats to go through. They would have to evacuate everybody by small plane at a tiny airstrip on the top of the island. So we can see oil would spread very quickly. Another thing, Enbridge does not have oil spill response equipment on scene in the Straits of Mackinac. So even if a cleanup were possible, which by the way, the oil industry considers a complete cleanup to be when they get 30% of the product spilled. They cannot point to one instance where they've actually been able to clean up 30% of what they spill. So we'd be talking huge damage from an oil spill in the Straits of Mackinac. The economic analysis that we ran shows that an oil spill would cost $6.3 billion in economic impacts, and that's aside from the natural resource damage, which we know would be something that you can't recover. Enbridge does not have insurance on this part of the pipeline. They're only required to have a financial assurance of $1.8 billion in liquid assets. And the subsidiaries that run Line 5 don't have that much on hand in liquid assets. So essentially, this spill would be on the state of Michigan to clean up, and it would be on Michigan, Wisconsin, and other states that border the Great Lakes to deal with the fallout from a disaster like this. So again, Governor Whitmer ordered Line 5 shut down in November of 2020. And after that, this sort of moved very quickly onto the national stage and into the federal court. Where we are now is Enbridge, the Canadian government, on behalf of Enbridge, has invoked a treaty from 1977 between Canada and the United States to try to say that Michigan can't shut down Line 5 and can't revoke the easement that the state entered into. So they could enter into the easement, but they can't revoke it, even though Enbridge has been in violation of that easement since 1968. Canada's arguing that Michigan can't revoke the easement and can't regulate oil and gas infrastructure if it crosses the border back into Canada. So regardless of how that issue gets settled on Line 5 specifically, if the United States government accepts the Canadian interpretation of this treaty, since this treaty has never been used before, this will set a precedent. If the US agrees that Canada has this broad right to interfere with environmental regulation on this side of the border, the precedent of that treaty will be that essentially to shut down any oil and gas infrastructure that crosses the Canadian border, you need the full approval of both the United States federal government and the Canadian federal government. So it's a very dangerous precedent that could be set in Washington here. The case around shutting down the pipeline is proceeding, where we could be hearing a ruling on whether or not this gets remanded to state court as soon as next month. Then again, it could take several more months. We just don't know what the judge's timeline on ruling is going to be. In the meantime, Enbridge is working to build this oil tunnel through the Straits of Mackinac as a replacement for Line 5. They would take upwards of 8 years from today to build the oil tunnel because they still have to go through an Army Corps EIS process, which is likely to take 2 to 3 years on a project like this. They still don't have approval from the Michigan Public Service Commission. They're seeking that approval currently. And we're, of course, arguing against that with both the Army Corps and the Public Service Commission. The other thing that we found out recently while researching this stuff, so Enbridge asked FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, last year for a 20-year depreciation timeline for the entire Lakehead pipeline system, which includes Line 3, Line 5, Line 78, and all the other pipelines that run through the Midwest that Enbridge owns. What a 20-year depreciation timeline means is that essentially what Enbridge is saying is, hey, our pipelines are going to be worthless by the year 2040 due to climate policy changes in the United States, which, great, they're foreseeing that we might have some progress on climate. However, the reason they're asking for this depreciation timeline is so they can jack up the tariffs that they're charging oil companies to transport their oil. So it's really just a move for short-term profits from Enbridge. Meanwhile, they're claiming they're going to operate this oil tunnel in the Straits for 100 years. They signed a 99-year lease with the state. So they're lying somewhere, and it's likely not where they would be prosecuted federally for lying, which is at FERC. So we're fighting the oil tunnel right now. In Michigan, the other thing I wanted to highlight is Enbridge's spending. This is a little bit out of date. This is a presentation I put together last year. We track Enbridge's ad spending, and in Michigan alone, in 2021, they spent $8 million on digital and TV advertising. That's just what we could track. Our tracker says we're probably tracking about 40% of their spending. They also gave $17 million in donations. One of their donations, for instance, was we had a resolution at a county commission a resolution to support shutting down Line 5. The same meeting that the commission was supposed to vote on the resolution, Enbridge showed up and gave them $60,000 for a brand new cop boat. So they decided not to vote on a resolution. So we got a large outraged crowd to show up at the meeting the next month and voted the resolution through. So Enbridge is spending a vast amount of money in advertising. They're spending a ton bribing local officials in donations again. Their political spending, we can't track so much. We caught them slipping up once where they donated, and it was a small amount, they donated like $135K to the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. And the next day, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce donated $135K to a lawsuit to stop a voting rights ballot initiative. So we were able to track Enbridge trying to beat that because one of their accounts was tied to it. But otherwise, they're really good at laundering their political money. So it's almost impossible to track where they're coming from. So the last thing I wanted to share, we're up on the air right now with an ad that I wanted to share here for you guys. So let's play it real quick. Oh, so that's our most recent ad. And then as far as what we can do now for action, some of the things that we could really use some help with at the federal level, the Biden administration is now involved. We're lobbying the White House, we're lobbying Congress as much as we can. And we could really use more outreach. What I'm hearing from leaders, congressional leaders in the fight here, like Representative Rashida Tlaib, is that Biden's hearing a lot from her. She needs to be hearing, or that he needs to be hearing from other lawmakers. If you guys could reach out to Tammy Baldwin and to other Wisconsin progressives and try to get them on board with lobbying Biden about this. Biden can shut down Line 5 on his own tomorrow. The political realities being what they are with gas prices and the Russian war, he's not going to do that tomorrow. But Biden could revoke the presidential permit for Line 5. And Enbridge couldn't even challenge that in court. The president has broad authority to revoke presidential permits. And the fact that Enbridge is operating without a permit in Michigan right now and without a valid easement is reason enough for President Biden to act. We've done all the economic studies showing that we don't need this oil and that actually Canada doesn't need this oil either. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to take this action in the near future. So we're building up the political will at this point to do just that. And I would encourage everyone, I just put a link in the chat to our presidential petition, where we're having folks sign to urge President Biden to take action to shut down Line 5. So yeah, thank you again very much for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean McMurray. Cheryl, how are we doing here? Don't we have time for some questions and feedback?
Yeah, sure. We are running over, so I apologize, but I think if people are willing to stay on, I know I have questions, but let's definitely try to get some questions in if folks are willing to spend it's 8:15, another 15 minutes, hopefully. If not.
Yeah, Sean, that was really something. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be really great to try to coordinate all this, but I really love the presidential petition idea. I think that sounds great. It is crazy to me that they can just continue to operate without a permit. Sean, what is that treaty called that you mentioned, the 70s treaty that Canada's using?
It's called the Transit Pipeline Treaty of 1977. It was signed at the height of the oil and gas crisis in the 70s, without much scrutiny at all, and when only the oil companies knew about climate change.
Wow.
Yeah, and my understanding of that treaty is that the position of Canada is pretty I'm an attorney. It's a pretty far-fetched argument that the treaty stands for the principle that the United States can't regulate this industry. I mean, it's ridiculous. The United States wouldn't even agree to that, even in the midst of the 70s oil crisis. So it's Canada's going to make the argument that Canada makes, but whether the treaty actually stands for that principle is a question of law.
It's all been so great and really, really informative. And I really appreciate everyone being here this evening. Does anyone have any questions? I'm not seeing any coming in the chat. So if anyone wanted to unmute and ask a question, you'd be welcome to do that at this point.
I guess I have a question for maybe Philomena or Chairman Mike, if he's still on. So it sounds like we have the EIS comments are due on the 15th. And we know that the comments submitted so far are overwhelmingly against the pipeline. You mentioned too that there's potentially, did you mention something about Glyphwick, or that there was something else that we could do? I'm sure another thing I was just going to throw out there is maybe hopefully just putting a shout out for financial support for your lawsuits. I can't believe you spent $4 million. It's kind of a staggering dollar figure on top of everything else you're battling with the pandemic. It's just absolutely incredible. But is there anything else like right now that we can do other than kind of sending our comments in on the EIS?
There were some really good links that some of the participants here tonight put up. Some of the same links that I would have put forward. There is one other, I'm just going to read it because I have it on my phone here. There's a Superior Waters StoryCorps has an opportunity for younger adolescents to work with Wisconsin storytellers, and I have a link to that I can look to email out, but essentially the StoryCorps I think is about in the spirit of what I saw in Susan's presentation, in the spirit of that story narrative, that advocacy along the lines of really telling and speaking about how we interact with these places. The Sierra Club and some of our local resistance chapters are organizing, that storyboard effort. And so, to that end, you know, sharing those stories, sharing how the Big Lake as a destination spot, how that moves people, and I think it's important for folks in Milwaukee and Madison and everything like that to tell those stories about what that experience is like when you come north and you look across the big water like that. It is a shared treasure that you know, that we all interact with in our own ways, and that's, you know, that's what we're working towards. And Sean, your PowerPoint was amazing. I would love to have you send that to me so I can take a look at that and also share it around my community. You know, I didn't cover the connectivity, but it plays right into Enbridge's hand for them to chop up that line and present everything as an island onto itself. You know, we used to always say back in the day as tribal leaders when we'd interact with EPA, somebody's got to talk about the cumulative footprint, you know, of the industry. And we were doing that from a mining perspective, you know, as all of the mine tailings and drainages and mercury and everything else impacted the Big Lake, you know, from the North Shore of Minnesota all the way through. But Line 5 is that cumulative black snake that is ripping through the Lake Superior drainage basin and on through the Great Lakes. From a treaty perspective, that we would allow international foreign-based corporation for private profit to interact in the freshwater stronghold of America like this is just it's ludicrous. And it's funny because their treaty claim is not unlike, or I'll say very similar to, their claims of eminent domain based off the existing paperwork within our on-reservation dispute. They take a little bitty an eighth of an inch and they try to take that 1,000 miles in terms of their power and control. It's just really amazing. And thank God our old tribal councils were diligent on the wording and the resolutions and everything else, because they're very, very clear, and they restrict Enbridge, you know, in a positive way in terms of our water protection.
You know, I was going to mention that Enbridge has pipelines all through Wisconsin, and on April 22nd, there's going to be a day of walking Enbridge pipelines and observing them. And I think some of us might think of going over to Jefferson County, which isn't far from Milwaukee, and looking at, there's an Enbridge pipeline there that leaked this past year, and Enbridge tried to cover it up. So just raising consciousness, they have a pipeline where they've used eminent domain in the western part of our state, taking away land from people. And they want to expand that one someday. So to try to focus, they're all over our state.
Yeah, the fact that a private company can even use eminent domain is crazy to me. I just wrote something in the chat. I know we had a water keeper that worked in Georgia to go after that specifically. They were trying to stop, and I can't remember what the pipeline was called there, and I'm pretty sure it was a Kinder Morgan pipeline, but they did, like, I think, change the law in Georgia that they can't do that. Yeah, I hadn't heard about the depreciation thing either, which is fascinating. I just feel like that is such a nugget that should be out there in the public domain, that they're trying to depreciate their assets and then saying, you know, that they're building this new pipeline at, you know, along Bad River, and that they want a 99-year lease for the Straits of Mackinac, you know, line. It's just absolutely crazy. Oh, thanks, Philomena. Philomena posted about the Army Corps comment. I thought that there was something else I missed. I think that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, the process of segmentation that they use, and they used it with line 3, they're using it with line 5, where they look at pipeline segment by segment for Army Corps review, is really damaging. It's a great strategy of the oil industry that they've used really well over the years, unfortunately, against us. And the depreciation thing, you know, with Enbridge, I like to think of Enbridge as a middleman. They don't make the oil, they don't sell the oil. All they do is mule it across the border. And they, you know, with the request on the depreciation timeline so that they can jack up their tariffs, I mean, it's part of the whole price gouging thing that we're seeing across the oil industry right now, with companies participating in price gouging in order to keep their profits flowing, and in order, as a fear tactic, really, to prevent us from winning and shutting down pipelines.
Yeah, I thought the film too, if people had a chance to see it, they talked a lot about KXL, but it's the same thing. And I mean, people are bringing it up, after this Ukraine battle too, like, oh, we need to approve KXL. And it's like, that was all sending Canadian oil to, to the Gulf to go onto ships to be sent elsewhere. And so like, there's this whole sense that these pipelines are helping us with our national oil supply, which is all, a gigantic farce. And it's the same with this line 5 too. It's going back, it's crazy. It comes into the US and it's going back to Canada. And we get nothing but the pain, as Sue mentioned. I mean, it's crazy. So do folks have other questions?
At the risk of I guess just boring my water warrior Phoebe, I want to share with you real quick by just sharing my screen. I want to share with you the eagle that I always see in that old prophecy about the eagle and the condor, and it's just a way of seeing. Sorry, Phoebe, but if you could give me permission to share my screen, I'll just show it to you quick.
You should have permission, Mike, or actually, let me make sure that, okay.
Yep, you should be good.
Okay. All right, so there's the Great Lakes. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
All right, it's just a way of seeing. There's the Great Lakes, the freshwater stronghold of America, through an old Indian squint and blur. The bottom map is tied into our culture. All birds are messengers. The most sacred of all is Migazi, the eagle, sent from the Creator, representing love, life, growing, everything you need to know about our home here that we're fighting for is all in a snapshot moment, in a sign, when we talk about our home. And then the other little vision I'll just show you is over here. If you can see where my cursor is, that's Bad River. That's the western arm of Lake Superior. I'm just going to blow up the western arm for you real quick and show you. In red is Madeline Island, Moning Wanakanig. That translates to home of the flicker. A flicker is a bird that's got a red nape across the back of its neck. It's got black mottled spotting across its back. And on my map, whether you use Pie Island or Isle Royal, it's got a white dollop of feathers above its tail feathers when it flies away from you down a trail. Madeline Island, the old Ojibwe word, is home of the flicker. And they say from the Kakagan wild rice beds on the shores of north shore of our reservation, you can look to the west and see the high hills of what's now Bayfield County. You can see the Pinocchio Mountains where they wanted to mine. You can look to the east and see the start of the Keweenaw Peninsula snowbelt. All those high places, all that water is rushing right at you in that moment. And Joe Rose Sr. used to say, you might think you're in the bottom of the bowl, but it's not a bowl. Bad River's always been home of the Thunderbirds, and this is her nest. And so I wanted to just show you whenever I hear the eagle and the condor, when I think about that eagle, that's that eagle that I recognize. And in a good way, it's just a way of seeing. And I think it's fun, and it helps me organize my thoughts and stay focused on love, life, growing, right? And the positivity. So just wanted to share that with you. Miigwech.
Thanks so much for sharing that. It's lovely.
Thank you, Chairman Wiggins.
Yeah. So I don't know how to get my screen off. So
I'm going to defer to Cheryl on that.
Yeah, oh, there you go.
all right.
Allie made that work for us. Well, I think if no one else has any questions, I'm cognizant that we are way over our time here, but really appreciate everybody and appreciate you, Eric, for leading this. Do you have any other finishing thoughts or questions?
I'm
on
just
your end?
amazed at who's showed up. And I mean, it is to have Sean with us from across the lake in Michigan, to have Chairman Wiggins, and to have Philomena Quebec, and to have Grace Quinn and Sue Batila. This has been really quite an evening.
Agreed. Thanks so
Thanks
much.
to you, Cheryl, and thank you to Lee Holloway also.
Yes, thanks to Leah for organizing this, and to Allie, who's kind of helping us behind the scenes. And we're gonna make, well, this is recorded, so we're hoping to get it out to everyone who registered and to our Senior Water Advocate Network and out to our membership. And we'll share it too with you guys if you guys want to share it on social media so it can get out to more people. That would be wonderful. Because I think we, in particularly if people could take those actions. We'll also I'll talk to Leah, but we can hopefully send out those links for all the resources via email to the folks that attended tonight, so folks can get those comments in on line 5 and sign the petition, the presidential petition. And thanks again so much for everybody for your time. We really, really appreciate you. And we're all in this fight together, and let's just keep working together and try to battle that black snake.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. We'll definitely send out links, and Susan shared with us her Water Protectors graphic novel, and we'll share that out with you all as well, and everyone who registered who couldn't be here tonight. So thank you all again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very
Thank you.
much.